Welcome everyone.
Thank you.
We're being recorded and live streamed. Just remind you of that. And we have one leave of absence from Councillor Ewan, and Alderman Barakis might be running a bit late. But we have a quorum. There's three of us here, so we'll get started. Item one, co-option. We don't have anyone to co-opt. Item two, confirmation of minutes. Someone like to raise their hand? Thanks, Alderman. Councillor Burnett. No dissent. Declare the minutes carried. Consideration of supplementaries. We don't have any. Item four, indication of pecuniary and conflicts of interest. No. Item five, transfer of agenda items. Nothing really much to transfer. Item six, reports. And 6.1 is the Hobart Transport Network Operating Plan, Phase 1 report. So we might get Neil or Stuart to give us an introduction. Neil, do you want Stuart to speak to this, or do you want to speak to this? Just to give us an intro.
Look, I'll just quickly introduce it, and Stu might take over to fill in the gaps. But basically, this is the first phase of a three-phase process. And the first phase, and in terms of the fundamentals of a network operation plan, it's basically an integrated approach to managing the transport network within the CBD for the to I suppose best suit the needs and the future needs of people within that spatial boundary that may be living in and working in it and moving through it. So fundamentally, we've identified the network, priority network for various users, and as a first stage, and from that we'll need to determine, I suppose, how we manage that that network in the next phase. But I might hand over to Stu to fill in any gaps in relation to the introduction that I've provided.
Sure, Neil, and thank you, Alderman Harvey. And I suppose the other key piece in this is about starting to create guidance for ourselves and the state as road managers and transport network managers about how to deal with the competing priorities of the resources that we have, and that is space and time allocation in terms of traffic signals and road space. And so we need to change some of those things in the future, especially as our land use changes and as the report notes. This work is in preparation for some of the central discussions that will, some of the key discussions that will come out of the Central Hobart Precincts Plan work, because these two are totally interrelated. The land use in the city in the future and how we run and operate the transport network are completely interlinked. And so this is, as Neil has indicated, this is the first stage, the first steps in opening that discussion about how we operate the network somewhat differently in the future.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. And can I just comment, I'm particularly interested in the Tasmanian government's committed, this 4.4, the Tasmanian government has committed to address growth through the City Hobart, through the Hobart Transport Vision 2018, which seeks to prioritise active and public transport modes to address the current network challenges. So I think that's good that the state government is committed to other forms of mobility, that they recognise the need for what we're doing here and what they're helping us with. So, Lord Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, I'm just wondering whether it's possible for us to provide some sort of direction at this point on a few things that I think look as though they're you know, there's the maps. I'm most interested in the maps actually, and the decision, you know, the suggestions about priority places and priority routes and things like that. And I guess if specifically I'm interested in pedestrian, well, pedestrian map sort of, but also the cycling map. So it's sort of maps on page 12, 13, 14. They're the main, and 15 actually. So is it possible to kind of give a few bits of feedback and questions?
Yeah, well, look, yeah, by all means. I think it's interesting. These maps came out of workshops of various stakeholders, so a reflection, I suppose, of that input.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
go on.
I guess that's why I'd like us as the City Infrastructure Committee to actually, you know, have a good look and make sure we're happy about some of the decisions that have sort of been flagged in this, because it's sort of, you know, this is the getting in on the ground floor. And if we don't say anything now, it's probably going to be seen as too late later.
What are you suggesting?
Well, I'll start at the traffic one first, so page 15.
15 on the bottom number?
Yeah, 15, the Jacobs report. I'm sort of...
Yep.
Yeah. So it's the blue one, the blue traffic. Now, for me, I've never understood why stronger priority isn't given to the role of Harrington Street as a south-north cross-city traffic. So in this map, it looks as though Harrington's, like, the priority is actually sending people around Mole and Goulburn, which, you know, given we're trying to make that, you know, that crossing point, the new crossing at Mole, and it sort of is quite a neighbourhood residential area, and Harrington Street is a bigger, wider street. It's one way. I mean, I know the other one's got one-way elements as well, but it's not as much of a rat run as going Mole, Goulburn, and then up Harrington. It's often empty in the morning. And I notice here that it's got a dotted line. Harrington's got a dotted line, which suggests that it's local. So, like, why would you come from if you're coming along Sandy Bay Road, you know, why would that then turn into a dotted line? So I guess that's, if anyone knows why that is, because if not, I'd suggest that we that a stronger priority be given to the role of Harrington Street for cross-city traffic.
Okay, sorry, Neil. If I could answer a couple of the first pieces here, Lord Mayor. The maps as they're shown are very much a reflection of how things are currently in the city. They're not really meant to be how things are in the future or what they could be in the future. And so what we see here is a bit of a reflection of how the network has evolved and what is actually sort of happening right now. And we know that. We see the steady stream of cars coming down, as your example, down Mole Street and sort of heading into that side of the city right now. And in part, that's a good reason for why these traffic signals need to go in on Mole and Collins Street to help pedestrians and others across that street. And so there's this aspect that in trying to develop some of this work, some of this first stage is to try and get a feel for what is actually happening right now, I suppose, as opposed to...
Yeah, but yeah, it does say here it represents a shared vision for how the road network should be managed and illustrates the strategic intent of the road network.
Yeah, the other thing with Harrington Street in that sort of strip is that there is a reasonable amount of retail on that section particularly between Collins and Liverpool Street, and ideally you wouldn't want to be too heavily trafficked, but on those shopping sort of strips, that is the other I suppose element to that.
And the Commonwealth offices and
Yes, that's right.
yeah. So how do we have an influence on this? Like, if we don't agree, if we want to, I mean, I'm happy to move an amendment that, the council expresses its preferences for, and we put in a range of suggestions. Because the other one I wanted to raise while I've got the floor is the cycling. And I'm pretty unsure about what's happening in the map after there's a sort of gap that I don't really want to just say, well, that's okay, we don't mind the gap. The gap, it goes around the cove and then sort of has to come back in this funny little sort of dotted thing before you come. Like, I actually want us to say, no, we want a priority cycling lane in Davey Street, because it's the major south. Like, once you come off the inner city cycleway, we want. I mean, I know it's not going to be easy, but I think isn't this the place where we actually say what we'd like?
Well, it is, but I think as officers, we felt that Collins Street was that priority east-west link through the city. It's not as heavily trafficked.
I'm sorry, I think when you come off the northern,
that's right. So you'd need to go into get into Collins Street, either probably via Argyle Street. Is the plan that we have, I suppose, already endorsed by council, and and then head along Collins Street into the Rivulet track. So get you off that heavily trafficked Davey Street wherever possible.
And you've got the two bridges as well, which people may start to use, which then links them up to
Collins Street.
Collins Street with a bit of a zig and a zag. Yep.
Yeah.
And Lord Mayor, just on your comments on the Harrington Street not being a priority road, well, being dotted rather than a solid line. If you come in the morning, a lot of traffic. I for instance, turn down Mole Street because I don't want to get stuck in the traffic in Macquarie Street. So Mole Street's the option, and then to go along Goulburn Street or up to Bathurst. So I can see why we go around that retail area rather than through it, for two reasons. It's a retail area, and also that it's more convenient to not get caught in the traffic going down Macquarie Street. So to take the other options, and that's also been identified as a priority way if we ever, for changes that may occur in Macquarie and Davey in the future with priority. Taking parking out of that part of Macquarie Street potentially to allow people to slip road into Mole Street.
And coming back to your question, Lord Mayor, about Davey, obviously it's only one way, whereas we would propose Collins Street obviously to be bi-directional, separated arrangement. So and it's a 40-kilometre speed limit in that area, whereas Davey and Macquarie are 50 kilometres. So it just made that proposition of priority, and it connects into the rivulet. So it just made sense. And I don't know, Stuart, whether you had any thoughts on that.
Well, I suppose our other thoughts are very much you know, every time we start a process like this, we end up wanting to put lines on a page to try and start to express where some of the thinking's coming from. And so I think we are very open to any feedback that, you know, is going to come from the council or from others. However, what we've been looking to do is try and, you know, accurately represent what is sort of happening now and where you might have as a starting point what's going on. Now, obviously, as we go into these next phases, we're going to see that there are parts of what's been now put on the page that show us where there are conflicts between road user groups, or show us that possibly now that there's a line on a page, people want the line somewhere else or want something different out of what's going on. And certainly as we now move into, you know, in the coming months, the Central Hobart Precincts Plan work, where we start to ask people and have those discussion papers about how we want the future of the city to be, there will be other, you know, lines that need to change as well, and other pieces of this puzzle that will necessarily move, especially as we start to see that reinforcement of change of land use with the university coming in across the city, and some other things that happen there that start to reinforce where other pieces of this might need to change. But we needed to put something on the paper and start the process, I suppose.
And the workshops that have been held, the quite in-depth workshops that were held with the cyclists and the pedestrians, does our input reflect those discussions? Because, you know, I would think that, you know, that those in-depth planning processes should be basically like mirror our feedback to the state government or to the NOP group, whoever's got the governance of this.
Stuart, you're a little bit more familiar with those plans. My understanding is that they are, to a large extent, particularly around cycling and pedestrians.
So the engagement forums that were held included representatives from cycling, pedestrian, our older users. John Pauly was representing, you know, some of the older users of the network. There were representatives there from the RACT and across the board, a whole bunch of people. Even within all those groups, there's not complete alignment as to what everybody sees as a particular corridor, because obviously people have familiarity with particular corridors, and that becomes a priority for them because they see that as something they're familiar with. And I believe that what we've got here is close to where groups would see things being. That said, I reckon what we're going to see is that you know, there's possibly still desire to change some of the routes in the main city, especially around pedestrians, where, as I say, as the university comes in, or as other residential and commercial developments happen around the city, you know, folk are going to want to see a higher order of priority and connection given to pedestrians in certain areas. So, you know, as I come back to, I don't think this is the fixed and final thing. This is that first stage of trying to identify where things are, and I believe we're capturing pretty well what those user groups are looking at. But even right now, as we've seen with the Brunswick hotel fire, you know, our need for rearranging public transport because of that fire and what's happened in Liverpool Street has changed our road user hierarchy almost overnight, with just an unfortunate event there. We still need to be aware of how we build flexibility into all these plans.
Okay.
Deputy Lord Mayor, did you have a comment?
No, I just see it as work in progress. I mean, I appreciate what the Lord Mayor is saying, and I'd be, if I'm thinking of those that bike traffic coming from Castro Esplanade. I mean, how many people would actually bother to go up Argyle Street to get onto Collins? I'm not sure, but so be it. And I think it's just a watching brief. We just continue on. So I'm happy to move the motion, but I don't want to stop any further discussion, of course.
And Alderman Barakis, welcome. And do you have any comments on this item?
Thanks, Chair, and apologies for my tardiness. Look, and noting my tardiness, I don't want to get into any redundancy on things that I might have missed, but I know the Lord Mayor mentioned consultation with the cyclists and the pedestrian groups. What sort of what representatives of motorists and car users were consulted? Was it just the RACT?
The RACT, the sort of heavy vehicle users forum. There was representatives from Tasports, was my memory. I can find the invitee and the actual attendee list if that would be useful.
Bus operators.
Metro was representative, was my memory.
Public transport, yeah. So, yeah. You don't need to get too down in the weeds, but what was the feedback from the RACT?
My belief was that they were comfortable that we were moving into a process to start looking at how we manage the network.
Okay. Look, I know the Deputy Lord Mayor and myself might disagree on the some of the particularities of what the best I suppose mix of transport might be, but I think ultimately I agree with her that this is a watch and act and a bit of a work in progress, and we'll see how it evolves. So I'm happy to support the motion as well.
And I suppose the other key thing for us was wanting to get this up onto a public agenda and put the work out there so it could be examined and looked at and reflected on as we move into these next stages of both the Central Hobart Precincts Plan and further work in this network operations planning.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. And the more I stare at the map, the more I realise that the dots are the pedestrian and alternative mobility, bikes and scooters and thing priority, because they've got more shopping, more stopping than the solid lines where there's not that much commercial activity. So I would imagine those solid lines are longer term parking and not much retail going on. So the dotted lines are really the retail streets where there's probably shorter term parking for higher turnover. And slower traffic looking to stop to do their purchases or whatever in the shorter term car parking. Would that be the right sort of analysis, Stuart?
The actual classifications that were developed in part with the workshop attendees were that the dots are sort of these local movement corridors where we're not wanting to give you particular advantage to just race through the area, and that does exactly as you suggest often associate with where the shopping and commercial activities are in the CBD. And then the connecting corridors are there just to try and connect around, and then we get to those sort of primary strategic corridors, which are the thicker lines, and they are those sort of strategic corridors that we want to that exist now, and that you would you want to be able to flow in and out of those two corridors on the connector roads. So I kind of see the logic in it. The more I stare at it.
Chair, can I just ask for my clarity, when you were talking about that, which page were you referring to?
Sorry, can you turn your volume up a little bit, please?
It's page 30. Page 30 on the agenda. So it's map for traffic. Yeah, so the dotted lines is where there's probably going to be, as you picked up on, Bill, greater friction, and therefore, people moving in and out, pedestrians moving across the street more readily. narrow, somewhat narrow streets. Not all of them are narrow, but
Yep. Okay. So, Alderman Baracus, yeah, if you're a bit hard to hear from my end, but if you caught up with the map yet?
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah. Yep.
Thanks for that, Joe.
Okay. All right. If there's no further comments, the deputy has moved the motion. So is there any dissent to this? Are we happy with the recommendations? No dissent. Okay, I'll declare that carried. And we'll move on to item 7, which is the committee action status report. Does anyone have any comments on the action status report? Lord Mayor?
Yeah, I started going through this in some detail because I was really keen to have a bit of a deep dive. It's currently at 21 pages, and almost every item I've sort of either got a question or maybe a suggestion that some could be taken off. But I appreciate that probably not everybody wants to, listen to me ask questions. But I just wonder, how can we as a committee actually, have a bit of a strategic look at this status report? Because there are some things that have kind of, from my mind, either should be removed or are kind of, I wonder whether there's any point in them sort of being there. They seem to have been there a long time without any action. And there are some things that there's just not enough information. And, I've got questions about when something might happen and what budget we're drawing on. So what would be the best format to do that?
Maybe, Chairman, I'll open the batting on this. I mean, certainly this list is managed by the 2 directors and other directors if they've got some involvement. Lord Mayor, we're as anxious to see the list reduced as I think anyone, but we're also conscious that things are not removed until their removal can be substantiated. Maybe a good way forward would be for you to approach the relevant directors on the ones that you've got specific questions on, and we can go forward. Or if you want to send, if you've got some notes and things you want to send there, we'd be happy to respond. Really in your hands, but certainly I take your point about the length of the list. But again, I say we're anxious that we don't delete things without the confidence to do so. I don't know whether, Neil, you've got any comment there?
Yeah, look, there are a lot of ones that have been substantially completed, but there might be one little item that's still outstanding.
Yeah.
So I'm more than comfortable in receiving questions and notes in relation to those, and happy to, I suppose, respond to suggestions.
Yeah, that'd be great. There is, though, a sort of second tier of things that it's almost like as a committee, we probably need to sort of talk about, well, actually, this is now a 4-year-old thing or a 5-year-old thing. Should we, as a committee, sort of bring up almost like a series of recommendations on what we consider the priorities within this list? So a bit of a strategic look at, well, actually these things are less important now, and like an omnibus sort of recommendation to council about some of the matters that maybe, because there's also a bit of duplication here and some slight contradictions between some projects and others. So you know what I mean? Like, I just sort of feel like it's almost like we need to have a bit of a workshop to work out which of the, what the committee thinks of the whole list.
Yeah. I'd be very, very keen for us to have an understanding of what our priorities and what are not anymore. But I think it'd have to be a motion of some sort to delist items that haven't been fully actioned. Yeah,
like a sort of that we as committee look at it all together and work out, which pieces, and actually then put up a recommendation to council that some, take a certain direction or get taken off, or
is that an opportunity maybe for next meeting that elected members review the extensive list and we work through them?
Could I suggest, rather than review them all, that we break it up and maybe do it over the next few months? And maybe, how many items are there? 20.
There's 21 pages. So.
Well, there's 20. I think there's 27 items there, Chairman, but there's a couple of them that are complete. When an item's complete, it's left on for one last round to let people know it has been completed, and then it'll be deleted. So depending on what comes out of this evening's meeting, we've got 25 or so.
All right, but I'd like to go through. I don't want to go through all 25 now, but I'm happy to break it down and go through them in some sort of systematic way, just so we can get an overview of how, deadlines and that sort of thing. Because I know some of them are nearly done. We're just waiting for that third and final part, or, there's in the city action plan there that we've done most of that we haven't quite completed. If we could put that on the agenda for next time, what do you think, committee? And we just go through over several meetings the whole list, just so we get an understanding of where we're at with it. So we're across everything and the stage of development of each of those numbers.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, Chair, I'm happy with that, but I'm just aware that some of these, like we need to be guided by the operational side of the organisation. You may have, obviously there are reasons why things take a while, and so I'd kind of like to hear what the prioritising and thinking has gone about, or has gone before we have that discussion. But more than happy to do that.
So are these just on there in a random order rather than a priority order or a close to completion order?
I think, Chairman, they're on there. It's probably chronological, they're added to from each meeting. Perhaps as a suggestion then, if Mr. Noy and I and any other director that's involved, or the CEO, really look at this list with some rigour over the next few weeks and table it as an item on the next agenda, and maybe we can provide additional comments as to whether we think there is an opportunity to set aside this particular body of work that might be left incomplete, and then get committee's ratification about that, so we can sort of provide a bit of direction under the comments section, whereas really the comments at the moment are very much the extent to which the matter's been implemented. Would you be happy?
And it might be a chance for the committee to say, actually, we think this, this might have sort of got a bit stuck, but we think if there's an opportunity, we'd consider this, to be given a higher priority. I'm just thinking, looking at, for example, the Salamanca pedestrian works was one where I sort of thought, well, what is stage 3 and what is the detailed planning and what's the budget and, how. So that's just one example, but it'd be great if we could do the first 10 next time and then the next 10 the following meeting or something.
Well, I think, Chairman, we'll have a really critical look at the list. We'll update it with some comments. Then if there are items that council or committee want us to report further on, or report with an intent of killing it off, then that can be a body of work we progressively work through from there on in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Chair. If I might, look, I agree with everything that's been said. I wonder, just as by way of a suggestion, if it might avoid us, because if we want to be able to do this properly and get into some of the details on these, we might end up, and I think that's hence your suggestion of breaking it up. We might end up having a 4-hour-long infrastructure meeting. I wonder if it might assist the staff in providing us with some good advice, so we can get into this in a full and wholesome way. If any of the members of the committee have preliminary thoughts or suggestions or queries, if we can't all, effectively share some notes and email the entire committee and the directors, ask questions or make some suggestions. So then when we do come before the committee next time, we've already done half of the homework. The directors know what we're looking at and what we're concerned about. We can kind of just jump straight into it rather than cold asking questions and them taking questions on notice, and then we'll come back to the next committee in another so many weeks' time. And I wonder if that might help speed the process up and ensure that we get good answers. Like if the Lord Mayor has suggestions or questions, send it through to everybody here, and then we can, when we get to the committee, we can just get straight into it.
All right. So, directors, I think you've probably got the vibe of the committee here. So, if it comes out as an item on the next agenda rather than just an update, an update, then we can go through parts of it, bring up the ones we've highlighted, and in the meantime, you'll have had a look at them and which ones are close to being taken off and or could be taken off. Yep. Okay. Would someone like to move the recommendation? We receive a note. Thank you, Alderman Barakis. I'll put that. No dissent. Okay, carried. We move on to item 8, which is responses to questions without notice. There were 2 responses, 8.1, Scramble Crossing, 8.2, cardboard recycling. So would someone like to move the information be received and noted? Thanks, Deputy. Okay, no dissent. Declare that carried. Moving on to item 8, questions without notice. Anyone have a question? Deputy?
Thanks, Chair. And it goes to the Director of Parks. So this question, which has been asked of me, and I think the Lord Mayor, could the Director please provide an update on the Warona Road Knocklofty stabilising works and explain the choice of wire netting, and 2, the Lena Valley Road single lane bridge upgrade works, and also the Newtown Rivulet Track fire trail and subsequent upgrades there, please.
Chairman, I'll take those on notice. Can I just get clarity though with that second question, Deputy? The Lena Valley Road and the fire trail work, which aspect of that what's your question in relation to those projects?
So the Lena Valley Road single lane bridge upgrade and choice of materials, and I imagine it's got something to do with flood mitigation in relation to the Gabion approach, and I think it's going to be a dual lane bridge there instead. Is that right?
So the question really is why that particular design and material choice, and presumably that applies to the fire trail as well.
Yeah, I'm just curious to know about the Gabion bridge and the fire trail works, just on that really up to the first bend of the Lena Valley track.
And again, that relates to design and material choices in respect of that project as well. Yep. Look, that's Chairman, right. I'll take those on notice. I think there is going to be a theme to the response, but I think what we might do is treat them as 3 separate questions and provide information on the 3 separate projects.
Okay, thank you. Did you get that, Belinda, or do you need more?
Adrian's Belinda tonight. We've recycled him. He's back in the sunshine, but I think between myself, Jason, and Adrian, I think we've got that, haven't we, gentlemen?
Yep, we're across that.
And Mr. Roth in the sunshine, have you got the gist of that? We'll assume that he has.
He's putting on a suntan lotion.
Yes. Maybe he's got some connection issues, but no, Deputy, I think I can handle that one for you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes.
Lord Mayor.
Yeah, I've got 2 questions. One's just around the recycled road trial. that work was done. It's not sort of on the status report as something that potentially is going to be reported back on. So just wondering, what will be the next steps with that?
Chairman, certainly, in fact, I looked at it myself yesterday. It's weathering well. We are doing the trial. We are doing the evaluation of it, but I provide an update in response to the question.
Okie doke. And another question just relates to, can there be advice provided to the council on the sort of approximate financial and staff time budget spent on the kind of provision and management of the yellow line regime in Hobart, and whether there's anything that we might be able to learn from other cities that perhaps have reduced the intensity of resources required to sort of manage the whole yellow line system, particularly around driveways, which I think my understanding is it is a fairly significant amount of staff time that has to be devoted to that process.
Yeah, happy to take that one on notice, Lord Mayor.
Any other questions? No? Okay. All right. On that note, we'll move into the close. Would somebody